When my wife, Allison, walked into the room, I thought she looked radiant, too radiant. Something about the way she carried herself that evening struck me as unusual. She wore a new dress, one I'd never seen before, her hair styled in soft curls cascading over her shoulders. It wasn't for me. I knew that much immediately. I'm Brian, a private investigator specializing in insurance fraud. Over the years, I've honed a razor-sharp instinct for lies and deception. Yet, in my own home, I had missed all the signs. I'd always prided myself on being a good husband and father to our 2 daughters, but that night, the seed of doubt took root. The moment that changed everything came not from Allison, but a careless, boastful stranger. I was in the restroom at a company party when I overheard a voice I recognized, Colin, one of my wife's colleagues. He was bragging to his friend about a conquest. At first, I dismissed it as his usual bravado. Colin was the type who exaggerated to impress others. But when he said her name, Allison, I froze. She was incredible, Colin drawled. Can you believe her husband left early to handle some work emergency? It's almost too easy. I've got her wrapped around my finger. We're meeting up again this Saturday. My stomach churned. I wasn't sure if it was the bad shrimp cocktail from earlier or the venom in his words. I stayed in the stall, holding my breath as the men laughed and left. The party outside continued, blissfully unaware, but I stood paralyzed in that cold, tiled space, realizing that my life was no longer what I thought it was. For the next few days, my mind refused to settle. I replayed the conversation in the bathroom over and over, the words echoing in my skull like a drumbeat I couldn't ignore. I've got her wrapped around my finger. The phrase gnawed at me, poisoning the air I breathed. How had I not seen it? How had I let her get away with this? Allison came home that night as if nothing had happened. She was the same as ever, full of smiles and warmth, kissing me like everything was normal. I returned her affection out of habit, but something inside me had shattered, and I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. I tried to stay calm, not to let my suspicions show. I didn't want to confront her just yet. No, I had to be smart. I was a professional when it came to investigations. I knew that catching a cheater wasn't about rushing in with accusations or accusations made in anger. It was about getting the proof, the undeniable evidence that could crush any defense they might offer. I started paying closer attention to Allison's routine. Little things that seemed harmless at first began to raise my suspicion. Her late-night trips to the bathroom, her increasing use of her phone, never leaving it unattended. The way she avoided looking me in the eye when we talked. My heart hardened with each passing day, and I knew something was off, but I couldn't be sure yet. Then came the Saturday she'd mentioned with Colin. She had told me she'd be getting her hair done, but I wasn't so naive as to believe that was all she'd be doing. No, I had already planned my move. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I made arrangements with my team to cover for me. I had to follow Allison and see for myself if my worst fears were true. I felt sick to my stomach, knowing that the woman I had built my life around, the woman I had trusted with everything, was likely about to betray me in the most unforgivable way possible. I parked a block away from the salon, watching through the tinted windows of my car as Allison emerged from the building, her blonde hair freshly styled. She smiled as she waved at someone across the street. I couldn't make out who it was at first, but then Colin stepped into view. They exchanged a brief hug before walking together toward his car. The rush of fury that hit me was overwhelming. I wanted to burst out of the car, to scream at them both, but I knew better than to act rashly. I stayed where I was, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I was no longer the man who would just let his wife walk all over him. This time, I would be the one in control. I followed them at a discreet distance, careful to keep my car far enough behind so they wouldn't notice. The drive was a short one, ending at a low-budget hotel on the outskirts of town. My stomach turned when I saw them enter the building together. The sight of them walking through the front doors, side by side, made me feel as though the world had turned upside down. I waited for a few minutes, giving them time to settle in. It was one of the worst things I've ever done, stalking my wife and her lover, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know what was happening behind that door. My mind raced as I thought about what I should do next. Should I confront them? Should I make a scene? The answer was clear. No. Confrontation would give her a chance to deny everything. I needed the proof, the irrefutable, humiliating proof that would bring her to her knees. I waited until I saw them emerge from the room about 2 hours later. They looked happy. Allison was laughing at something Colin said, and for a moment, it felt like I had been hit by a truck. That was my wife, the woman I had built a life with, the mother of my children, laughing and walking with another man as if I didn't exist. The rage boiled up inside me, but I swallowed it down. I couldn't let it take control. Not yet. I followed them back to her car, heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't the way I'd planned it, sneaking around, spying on my wife, but it felt like the only way to truly uncover the truth. It was my last chance to end the lies. After they parted ways, I waited until Allison had driven a few blocks away before I followed her again. She didn't suspect anything. She thought she had gotten away with it. Little did she know, her world was about to come crashing down. When she arrived home, I was already there, sitting in the living room, waiting for her. I tried to steady my breathing, trying to make sense of the situation. What was I going to say? How could I possibly confront her without exploding in anger? Allison walked through the door, her face lighting up as she saw me. "Hey, babe," she said brightly, brushing her hair back. She looked so normal, so innocent. I wanted to scream, to tear into her, but I didn't. "Where have you been?" I asked casually, my voice low and controlled. "Oh, just the salon. You know, getting my hair done." "The usual," she replied, dropping her purse on the table and glancing at her phone. "What's up?" I couldn't help but notice the way she avoided my eyes as she spoke. I knew she was lying. It was written all over her face. But I wasn't going to call her out on it just yet. I had a better plan, right? I said slowly, leaning back in my chair. "So, tell me, how long has this been going on?" Her face froze. For a moment, she looked as though she didn't know what I was talking about. "What are you?" "Don't lie to me, Allison," I said, my voice colder now. "I saw you today, with Colin. Don't even try to pretend like I don't know. I saw everything." Her face paled as the blood drained from her cheeks. For a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights, unsure of what to do. Brian, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can," I interrupted, standing up slowly. "But don't bother. I don't want to hear it. I've heard enough lies from you over the years. Today, I got all the answers I needed." She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. The truth was undeniable. She couldn't cover it up anymore. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I want you to understand something," I said coldly, walking toward her. "You thought you could betray me and get away with it, but you're wrong. The recklessness of your actions has consequences." She seemed to shrink in front of me, her expression a mix of guilt and fear. But it was too late for apologies. She had crossed a line that no amount of pleading would erase. "You made a mistake, Allison. A huge one. And now, I'm going to make sure you understand just how much it's going to cost you." Allison's eyes widened, her breath quickened, and she took a hesitant step back as I moved closer. I could see the panic rising in her. For the first time in years, she wasn't the confident woman who'd always had an answer, a quick excuse, a way out. No, this time, she was caught, completely exposed. I watched as the realization sank in, and it wasn't the guilt or the remorse that struck me most. It was her desperation. She didn't care about the damage she'd done to our marriage. What she cared about was saving herself, protecting her comfortable life, the one where she could have everything without the consequences. You're just going to throw everything away?" she asked, her voice shaky but still holding a hint of defiance. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to throw me out?" I stood there, my gaze never leaving hers. Her words stung, but I wasn't fazed. All the anger and hurt I'd been holding inside for so long now boiled over, and it was impossible to hold back. "You threw us away, Allison," I said slowly, making sure she understood every word. You threw our family away, just so you could have a little affair with Colin. You think I'm just going to forget that? You think I'm supposed to forgive you? Like you haven't been lying to me for months?" She started to cry then, the kind of crying that's meant to manipulate, to make you second-guess everything you know. She put her hands to her face, trying to hide her tears, but I saw through it. This wasn't the first time I had seen her cry, but it was the first time I didn't care. Brian, I made a mistake. I don't know what happened. I was confused. It was just a stupid fling. It didn't mean anything. Please, don't do this, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Please, I'll do anything. I couldn't hold back my disgust anymore. The woman I had loved for so long was standing in front of me, reduced to nothing more than a liar, a cheater, begging for mercy after she'd shattered everything between us. You've done plenty, Allison, I said coldly. But what you don't realize is that I don't need to do anything. You've already sealed your fate. The silence that followed felt suffocating. She was no longer looking at me directly. Instead, she stood there, her head bowed, as though she were trying to retreat into herself, to hide from the truth she knew would follow. You think this is just about me finding out you're cheating, don't you? I said, taking a step forward, my voice rising. You think this is just about me being angry about a fight between us. But no, Allison, this is about betrayal. This is about you thinking you can lie to me, disrespect me, and walk away with a clean slate. Well, it doesn't work like that. I paced for a moment, collecting my thoughts. There was no more room for apologies, or I didn't mean to excuses. She had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. She had destroyed the trust between us. And trust, once broken, was gone forever. I'm going to make sure this mess doesn't end with a couple of angry words, I continued, my voice steady but cutting. I've already got a plan. And trust me, it's not one you're going to like. Her eyes darted around the room, as though searching for an escape route. But it was too late. I had already prepared everything. I'd thought about this for days, even before I followed her to that hotel. Every move I made from this moment on would be calculated. She wasn't just going to lose me. She was going to lose everything. I don't know what you think you're going to do, but I can't lose you, Brian, she said desperately, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll fix it. I swear. I'll never see him again. Please, please, don't leave me. I stared at her for a long time, my mind racing. What was it that kept me from just walking away? What was keeping me here, watching this woman crumble in front of me? Was it the years we had spent together? Was it the life we'd built? Maybe. But the truth was, I didn't care anymore. I was done. I had already made the decision. I wasn't going to forgive her, but I wasn't going to just walk away quietly either. You're going to regret what you've done, Allison, I said firmly, the weight of finality in my voice. And I'm going to make sure you feel every ounce of it. The look of panic in her eyes deepened, but this time, it wasn't because she feared losing me. It was because she knew, deep down, that I was going to make her face the consequences of her actions. The game was over. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I didn't waste time with emotional confrontations. I didn't need to. I had learned a long time ago that if you wanted to take control of a situation, you had to be one step ahead. I had been preparing for this moment for months, even before I found out about her affair. My job as a private investigator had given me the tools, the resources, and the knowledge to manipulate the situation to my advantage. I contacted a lawyer I had worked with before. I didn't want her to see it coming. The divorce papers would be filed that week. But that wasn't all. I wasn't just going to divorce her. I was going to take everything. Our house. Our assets. I would strip her of every comfort she had grown so used to. And she would have no way to stop it. But the real kicker? I wasn't going to leave her alone. I would make sure the world knew what she had done. I would make sure her affair with Colin wasn't some dirty little secret hidden in the shadows. Everyone would know. I had the resources to make it happen, and I wasn't afraid to use them. I spent hours compiling everything I needed. Texts, emails, photos, the surveillance footage from the hotel room, all of it. The moment I handed those divorce papers to her, I would make sure she knew that the life she thought she could escape to with Colin wasn't going to happen. And Colin? He'd get his share too. Allison had no idea what was coming for her. The storm was brewing, and when it hit, there would be no safe place for her to hide. She had played with fire, and now, it was time for her to get burned. I would be the one to ensure that she paid the price for the damage she had caused. The reckoning was here. and I would be the one to make sure she felt every bit of it. The day the divorce papers were filed, I watched her face fall when I handed them to her. She stood there in the living room, frozen, staring at the crisp sheets of paper as if they were some sort of abstract concept she couldn't comprehend. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered everything she had done. Her lips trembled as she reached for the papers, and she looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Brian, no. Please. We can fix this." I had no intention of offering her any kind of mercy. The moment I had handed her those papers, my heart had turned to ice. I had already made the decision, and nothing she said or did could change it. The betrayal, the lies, the affair with Colin. Everything had led to this moment, and now it was her turn to feel the consequences of her actions. "No, Allison," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "We can't fix this. You destroyed everything. You thought you could have it all, me, the kids, and your affair with him. But you were wrong." Her eyes filled with tears again, and I could see the faint desperation in her expression, the realization that I wasn't going to cave. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to silence her. "I don't want to hear it," I said firmly. "You can pack your things and leave. You've got 3 days to get out. After that, I'll have the locks changed. If you're still here, I'll call the cops." The words hung in the air, suffocating us both. She collapsed onto the couch, clutching the divorce papers to her chest like a lifeline she couldn't hold on to. Her voice wavered, but she managed to say, I don't deserve this." "You're right," I replied coldly. "You don't deserve it. You never did." I could hear her muffled sobs as I turned and walked away, but it didn't bother me anymore. I had already mourned the loss of our marriage. I had already cried my own silent tears. Now, it was time for her to face what she had done. The next few days were a whirlwind of action. I made sure the divorce papers were filed, and I had my lawyer contact Allison's attorney. I wasn't going to let her drag this out. I wasn't going to let her stall or manipulate her way back into my life. Everything she had built with me was about to come crumbling down, and she needed to understand that. But it wasn't just about the divorce. No, I had one final piece to play, something that would make her regret everything. And it wasn't just for her. It was for Colin too. I had contacted Colin's wife, Sarah, the day I found out about the affair. I wasn't sure how she would react, but I knew she deserved to know the truth. If she was going to be blindsided by her husband's betrayal, I wasn't going to be the one to let her remain in the dark. I set up a meeting with Sarah at a small cafe just outside the city. She was shocked when I showed up, her eyes wide with confusion as I slid into the seat across from her. She looked so innocent, nothing like the woman I had pictured in my mind. She was just a regular woman, but the weight of what I was about to tell her would shatter her world. "I don't know how to say this," I began, my voice low, "but I think you need to know something about your husband." She stared at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? What's going on?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Your husband, Colin. He's been having an affair with my wife, Allison, for months." The shock that registered on Sarah's face was immediate. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what I had just said. Her hands trembled as she reached for her coffee, but it seemed to spill everywhere, as though her body had betrayed her, unable to contain the flood of emotions rushing through her. No, that's not possible," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't flinch. I wasn't here to comfort her. I was here to deliver the truth. And Sarah deserved that, no matter how much it hurt. "I'm sorry, but it is," I said, pulling out my phone. I showed her the evidence. Photos of Allison and Colin together, laughing, holding hands, even one of them leaving the hotel room. "I'm not here to destroy your life, but I think you deserve to know what's been going on behind your back." Sarah's eyes darted back and forth, taking in the images, her face pale with shock. Then, slowly, she looked up at me, her lips trembling. "How long has this been going on?" I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but I steeled myself. This was about justice, not kindness. "Long enough," I said flatly, "but it ends now. I'm getting a divorce, and I wanted you to know that you don't have to stay in the dark anymore." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to gather her thoughts. I could see the anger rising in her, anger that would soon consume her. It was a fire I knew all too well. I don't know what to say, she whispered, still in shock. I don't know how to deal with this. You'll find a way, I said. I know you probably never expected this, but you deserve better. Colin's a coward, and you're better off without him. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes distant, as if she was trying to process everything. Finally, she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you. I stood up, feeling the weight of everything I had just done. You deserve better, Sarah. Don't let him make you feel otherwise. I walked out of the cafe, leaving her there, staring at the screen of her phone as if she were trying to make sense of the devastation I had just dropped on her lap. I didn't feel pity for her, not anymore. I had done what needed to be done. Now, it was her turn to deal with the fallout. When I got home, I saw Allison packing. She was stuffing clothes into suitcases, her movements frantic. She was trying so hard to hold it together, but I could see the cracks forming. She was broken, just like I had been. The difference was, I wasn't going to fix her. I wasn't going to save her from the consequences of her own recklessness. She looked up when I entered the room, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. Brian, please, she said, her voice trembling. I'll go, but please don't do this. We can work through it. I shook my head. No, Allison. There's nothing left to fix. I wasn't angry anymore. I was numb, and in that numbness, I knew that this was the end of our marriage, the end of everything. I didn't care what she did next. I didn't care where she went. She had made her choice, and now she was going to live with it. And as I watched her leave, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, because I knew that, no matter what happened next, I had won. I had made her face the consequences of her betrayal. I had made sure she knew that she couldn't get away with this, and that, in the end, was all I needed. It's strange how quickly things can change, how the world can turn upside down in an instant. I had spent days meticulously planning my revenge on Allison, thinking that once she was out of the house and the divorce papers were filed, it would all be over. She would pay for what she'd done, and I would walk away victorious, free of the lies and betrayal. But as I watched her pack her things that day, something unexpected happened. A shift that completely changed everything. She had been crying, her face streaked with mascara, her hands shaking as she shoved clothes into suitcases. But then, something in her demeanor changed. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in days, I saw a different woman. The woman I had married, the woman I had loved, not the one who had cheated, but the one who had once promised me forever. I don't know why I paused. Maybe it was the exhaustion finally catching up with me, or maybe it was the years we had spent together, the life we had built. I had told myself I was done with her, that I couldn't forgive her, and yet, in that moment, a flicker of doubt crept in. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I messed up, Brian. I was selfish. I didn't think about you, about the kids. She stopped herself, eyes welling with more tears. I never meant to hurt you. Please, can't we talk about this? Can we figure it out? I shook my head. You don't get it, Allison. You can't just mess up and then expect everything to go back to normal. You've destroyed everything. But as she stood there, looking so broken, so vulnerable, something deep inside me twisted. I had spent so much time focusing on my revenge, on making her feel every ounce of the pain she had caused me. But now, as I looked at her, I wondered if I was the one who was truly broken. I turned and walked out of the room. I needed space. I needed to breathe, to think. The weight of it all, the anger, the hurt, the shame, was too much to handle in that moment. I went for a drive, letting the cool air of the night calm my racing thoughts. The city lights blurred past as I drove aimlessly, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had settled in my chest. But just as I turned a corner near the edge of town, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Sarah, Colin's wife. At first, I thought it was just a random check-in, a follow-up from our meeting earlier that week. But as I read the message, my stomach dropped. Brian, we need to talk. It's about Colin. I felt a sudden coldness sweep over me. My fingers trembled as I typed back. What about Colin? Her response came quickly. He's gone. He's disappeared. I don't know where he is, but I think something's wrong. I need your help. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Colin was gone? Disappeared? I had just seen him a few days ago. He had been so sure of himself, so smug. What the hell was going on? I didn't know why, but I immediately turned the car around and headed straight to Sarah's house. My mind raced with questions. Was this part of a bigger plan? Had Colin skipped town because he knew I was coming for him? Or was there something else going on? When I arrived at Sarah's, she was waiting by the door, her face pale and strained. "Brian, thank you for coming," she said, her voice tight with fear. "I don't know what to do. He's gone. I've been trying to reach him all day, but he's not answering his phone. His things are gone. I think something's happened to him." I followed her inside, my mind spinning. "What do you mean, something happened to him? You don't think he just left, do you?" Sarah shook her head, her eyes wide with worry. "No, it's not like him. He wouldn't just leave without a word. He's been acting strange the last few days. And then today, he just disappeared. There's no sign of him." I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was wrong. Something bigger than I had imagined was unfolding right in front of me. "Do you have any idea where he might have gone?" I asked. She hesitated. I don't know. But, Brian, I think he might have known something was coming. Something about you. The way he's been acting, the things he's been saying. I think he might have run because of you." I stared at her for a moment, letting her words sink in. "You think he's running from me?" She nodded. "Yes, I think so. And I don't blame him. But if something's happened to him, if he's in trouble, I need your help to find him." I didn't know what to say. My mind was reeling. The man who had betrayed me, the one who had been sleeping with my wife, was now missing. Had he gone into hiding? Had someone else gotten to him? All I knew was that this wasn't over. The game had shifted, and now I was playing a new one. "I'll help you find him," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "But we need to do this carefully. We can't let anyone know what we're doing. If he's in trouble, we need to find out why." I spent the next few hours with Sarah, going through Colin's things, searching for any sign that might lead us to him. But the more we looked, the more confused I became. There were no clues, no messages, nothing that indicated where he had gone. It was as if he had just vanished. And that's when it hit me, the sudden, terrifying thought that maybe Colin wasn't running from me at all. Maybe he was running from something worse. I left Sarah's house with a pit in my stomach. My plan had always been to expose Colin, to ruin him as he had ruined me. But now, I wasn't sure who the real enemy was anymore. The twisted web of lies and betrayal had just gotten a whole lot more complicated, and I was about to find myself in the middle of something far darker than I could have imagined. As I sat in my car, staring at the empty street ahead, I realized the full scope of what I was up against. The stakes had changed. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my life. And somewhere out there, Colin was hiding from something. But what? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The mystery of Colin's disappearance gnawed at me, turning every thought into a tangled knot of suspicion and fear. The man who had so carelessly stolen my wife was now in hiding, and I was left with more questions than answers. What was he running from? Had he left because of what I'd done? Or was there something far more sinister at play here? I knew I had to act fast. I wasn't just dealing with an affair anymore. No, now I was involved in something bigger, something darker. I couldn't just wait around for answers to fall into my lap. I had to take control, and that meant finding Colin and finding out what the hell he had gotten himself into. The next morning, I called Sarah. She didn't answer, and for the first time, I felt a ripple of concern for her. I had never expected to be part of a bigger picture, but I had learned that no one was ever as innocent as they seemed. Was Sarah involved in this somehow? Had she known more than she had let on? I knew I needed to move quickly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there were pieces I was missing. If Colin had disappeared on his own, why hadn't he contacted her? If he was truly running from me, why would he leave behind everything? His clothes, his phone, his car? I decided to follow a hunch. It wasn't just about finding Colin anymore. It was about uncovering the truth behind his disappearance and, by extension, finding the truth about Allison's betrayal. I needed to understand why Colin had been so confident, so smug in the weeks leading up to this. And I had a feeling that the answers were not in the city. At least not the answers I needed. I went back to the hotel where I had seen Allison and Colin together. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Maybe I thought I would uncover some clue that would point me in the right direction, something that would unravel this twisted puzzle. Or maybe, deep down, I just needed to see the place where it all started. The place that had become the symbol of her betrayal. The hotel lobby was quiet when I entered. It was midday, the usual crowd of business travelers and weekend tourists nowhere in sight. I approached the front desk, trying to act casual, but I could feel the tension building inside me. I didn't have a plan. I was improvising, hoping that something, anything, would give me the edge I needed. I was here a few days ago, I said to the receptionist, a young woman who didn't look old enough to be working at such a nice place. I was just wondering if you could check the security footage for me. I need to confirm something. She raised an eyebrow, clearly suspicious. We don't typically release footage unless it's to the authorities. But if you give me a name or a room number, I can check. I hesitated. This was risky. If she called the cops, it would blow everything wide open. But I had to try. Room 307, I said, keeping my voice steady. I was here a few days ago with my wife. I think I left something in the room, and I was just checking if I could get the footage from the security cameras to see if I left anything behind. She typed something into the computer, and I held my breath, hoping she wouldn't ask too many questions. After a few moments, she glanced back at me, her expression unreadable. Actually, I don't see you listed under that room. It looks like it was booked under someone else's name, she said, her tone polite but distant. I tried to keep my cool, but I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Someone else's name? That didn't make any sense. Colin had definitely been in that room. And Allison, well, she had been with him. Had they used a fake name? Or was there something more to this? Can you check the name? I asked, trying to mask my unease. I'm sure I left something behind, and I'm trying to track it down. She tapped the keyboard again, and after a few moments, her eyes widened. Wait a minute. There's a name here. Colin Wilson. I felt a jolt of recognition, and suddenly, everything started to click. This wasn't just a hotel room. It was Colin's. Allison had used his name. They hadn't even bothered to cover their tracks properly. But why? I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, and I wasn't about to let some hotel clerk stand in my way. Can you show me the footage from the night they checked in? I pressed. It's really important. She looked hesitant, but then she nodded. Give me a moment. I watched her as she turned toward the back room to retrieve the footage. My mind raced as I tried to process everything. Why had they used Colin's name? Why hadn't Allison told me about it when I asked her about the affair? And why did it feel like I was uncovering a bigger secret, one that was far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined? When the receptionist returned, she handed me a small slip of paper. Here's the footage you requested. It should be on the disc. Just be aware that you'll need to take it to the main office for review. They can't allow guests to view footage directly. I nodded, already anticipating the next step. I didn't need to view the footage in public. I could always go back to my office, or even better, I could show it to Sarah. She needed to be part of this. She was just as much a victim as I was, and if we were going to get to the truth, I couldn't do it alone. But as I turned to leave, the receptionist stopped me with one last piece of information. There's something else, she said, her voice lowered. I don't know if this is relevant, but Colin Wilson, he hasn't checked out yet. According to our system, his room is still active. That was it, the final twist. Colin hadn't left the hotel. He was still there. And whatever was happening, whatever was going on, I knew it was about to come to a head. The questions swirling in my head were now louder than ever. I had started this journey to expose the affair, to get revenge. But now, it seemed like I had opened a door to something much darker. Colin wasn't just a cheat. He was hiding something. Something that had made him run. And I was going to find out what that something was, even if it meant risking everything I had left. The elevator doors slid open, and Mark Donovan stepped into the hallway, blocking my only exit. His dark eyes never left mine as he approached, his posture calm but threatening. like a predator sizing up its prey. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I forced myself to stand tall. This wasn't the first time I'd been in a situation where I had to play my cards right. But this was different. "I see you found the files," Mark said smoothly, as though this were some sort of business transaction rather than a life-and-death confrontation. "Victor will be very pleased with you. You've made things so much easier." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the papers in my jacket like a ticking time bomb. "Who the hell are you? Really?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the growing terror in my gut. He gave a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You really want to know, Brian? You want to know how deep you're in? You think Colin's the only one you need to worry about?" It was the last thing I wanted to hear, but it was exactly what I needed to know. I wasn't just caught up in some petty affair anymore. This was about power. It was about something far more dangerous than betrayal. "You've crossed the line," Mark continued, stepping closer, his voice lowering. "The moment you decided to dig into Colin's life, you became part of this. And now, you've made it personal. This isn't just about your wife. This is about everything we've worked for. You don't get to walk away." I could feel the panic rising, but I pushed it down. This was my fight now, and I wasn't going to let this man intimidate me. Not when I had already lost everything. "Listen to me, Donovan," I said, my voice cool but laced with warning. "I don't care what you or your boss are involved in. I'm going to make sure this ends today. If you think you can walk away from this, you're wrong." Mark paused, looking at me as if I were a child trying to act tough. Then, without warning, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, a phone, or a communicator of some sort. He pressed a button, and a low, crackling voice came through. "Is it done?" the voice asked. I froze. This wasn't just a conversation. This was a plan. Something bigger than I could have ever prepared for. "Not yet," Mark replied calmly, never breaking his gaze from me. "But it will be soon. I'm handling it." I tried to take a step back, but the weight of the situation was sinking in too fast. These people, Victor Kane, Mark, Colin, none of them were going to let me leave this hotel alive. I knew it now. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a battle for survival. I reached into my jacket, but not for my phone. No, I was smarter than that. I had one final ace up my sleeve, something I had planted earlier when I first suspected that things were getting too deep. The device I had slipped into the hotel's Wi-Fi network hours earlier. I'd been monitoring the conversations between Victor Kane's network all day, and now, I was about to use it. "Tell your boss this ends now," I said, taking a breath and tapping a few commands into my phone. The Wi-Fi signal from my device surged through the system. The hotel's security cameras, connected to the network, instantly began to record and broadcast everything onto the screen I had set up back at my office. "Do you really think you can control this?" Mark sneered as he glanced down at his phone. His eyes narrowed when he realized what I'd just done. "Let's see how long you can keep a secret when the whole world sees you for what you are," I said, keeping my voice steady. The screen behind him buzzed with activity. Video footage, files, and messages flashed on the screen, exposing everything. The deals, the criminal activities, the web of lies and corruption that Colin and Mark were entangled in. And there, in the middle of it all, was Victor Kane's face. His name and his links to politicians, businessmen, and corrupt officials were laid bare for anyone who cared to look. This was no longer just a personal vendetta. This was bigger than me, and now it was bigger than them. Mark's face twisted into something darker. The smile was gone now. "You think you've won, don't you?" he said, his voice cold and deadly. "You've just made yourself a target. You and your family." He took a step forward, his hand reaching for something hidden in his jacket, but I was ready. I had been expecting this moment. Without hesitation, I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy glass lamp, and swung it at his head. The impact sent him stumbling back, his hand dropping to his side as he crumpled to the ground. But even as he fell, I knew this wasn't over. Mark Donovan wasn't the real threat. He was just a pawn. I rushed to the door, but before I could reach it, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. More people, more enemies. I took a deep breath. This wasn't just about Colin anymore. It wasn't just about Allison's betrayal. It was about survival. As I pushed through the door, I heard Mark's voice from behind me. You won't get far, Brian. You're already in too deep. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I had already made my decision. There was no going back. I had lost everything. My wife, my peace, my innocence. But one thing I still had was my will to survive. And if I was going down, I would take every last one of them with me. By the time I reached the street, the adrenaline had worn off, and the gravity of what I had done sank in. There would be no going back to the life I once knew. The secrets I had uncovered were too powerful, too dangerous. But I didn't care anymore. The game was over for Colin, for Mark, for Victor Kane. And as I walked away from that hotel, I knew one thing for sure. I had won.